Hillary Clinton handing her private email server over to the Justice Department. We're going to talk to former federal prosecutor about whether this is big trouble or not for Hillary. Also, today, Tom Brady facing the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell in a federal courtroom. Brady, as you know, fighting his 4-game suspension. Wait till you hear what Goodell is trying to get him to do. Then, convicted of murder even though they didn't pull the trigger. We're going to tell you about the Elkhart 4 teenagers looking at up to 50 years in prison because their friend got killed during a burglary that they were a part of. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. A lot of different things to cover in the next 60 minutes, but we begin with that email controversy that keeps dogging Hillary Clinton. Now, the former First Lady and Secretary of State got a double dose of bad news today. She's handing over her private email server and thumb drive over to the Justice Department, and an inspector general says several emails stored on that server contain classified information, and 2 of them are considered quote-unquote top secret. Clinton spokesman released the following statement, quote, "She pledged to cooperate with the government security inquiry, and if there are more questions, we will continue to address them." All right, let's get to our legal panel. We're going to weigh in now. Jim Kasuris, criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association, frequently lecturing at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug Von Oist, founding partner of Carson Von Oist, focusing on corporate misconduct, and selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the entire country. Amy Dardashian, an attorney and legal analyst and Emmy Award-winning journalist. Yes, she's part of the media like me, you people. Bill Aronwald, a defense attorney and a former assistant U.S. attorney. And Bill, I'm going to start with you. Is this just yet another step in the process, or did this go from being a headache to a big deal for the former secretary?
Well, I think it began and is still a big deal for the former secretary. It is a federal crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison if you willfully and knowingly disseminate classified information to an unauthorized person. Here's where it gets tricky. If we've listened to what she said, she has minced her words very carefully, I think. What she has said is that she did not at any time receive or send any information over her personal server that was classified at the time. So the real question here is, you can have information that becomes classified at some point and then later becomes declassified. Her use of the words "at the time" suggests to me that while she may have disseminated or received information on a personal server that may have at one time been viewed as classified, her position is that at the time it was sent or received, it was not classified then. The next question is authorized person. It is a crime to disseminate classified information to an unauthorized person. Well, the statute defines authorized person as a person authorized by the President of the United States or the head of a department of the United States to receive that information. As Secretary of State, she was the head of the department. So if you take a look at the information that she sent or received, and assuming it was sent to someone in the State Department, she could claim that that person was authorized by her to receive that information.
Okay, and I'm not going to minimize the importance of classified information, staying classified, and whether it was on our personal server or the State Department server. However, the optics of this are as important as the substance. To me, and at the risk of sounding like a Hillary apologist, even if this was ill thought, even if this was arrogant, even if there was hubris involved, it seems that we have an investigation in search of a harm, in that nobody is saying anyone was harmed during this. No one said any intelligence assets were compromised in the field. Nobody said anything as it relates to state policy was being manufactured for the benefit of somebody else. I'm still waiting for how this may have harmed anybody. Well, am I missing? I mean, listen, every scandal we get into, either somebody's lying in their pockets, somebody's covering up for screwing around with somebody else, somebody's trying to get the dumb nephew a job in some place because he's going to use his political influence. I'm still waiting for, not the crime, because you articulately said it, Bill, but where's the harm?
Well, the statute doesn't require there be harm.
But shouldn't the law do that? Well, meaning that if we're going to be looking to issue a penalty, don't we have to first find out what they did wrong?
But there's a potential. You can do something wrong without a harm, but there's a reason it's wrong. And so
Granted.
there could have been, and there can be in the future when people flaunt these rules, there could be a situation where her personal email is hacked because it's easier to hack it. There could be the improper, unauthorized dissemination of very classified information. Something's wrong because of the potential for harm as well as the actual harm.
Well, but it goes beyond that. There are certain statutes which impose what we call strict liability. This is a strict liability statute. It doesn't require harm. It's not a forgiving statute. It prohibits certain activity. If you engage in that activity, you are guilty of the crime.
I agree with you.
Not only if you engage in the activity, but under the statute it said if you have reason to believe that this sensitive information could injure the United States in the future, then you're liable.
Okay, no, where's the line, though, Amy, between nobody thinks that Hillary Clinton set up her own personal email and lugged the server into Chappaqua and set the thing up, okay? So how much, from her perspective, can she say, time out? I do bear responsibility for certain things, but I didn't set up the apparatus, I didn't set up the chain, I didn't make the distinguishing between what was or wasn't, when it was or who it wasn't in terms of the classification.
Right.
How much does the buck have to stop at her desk versus her saying, you can't expect me to know all of the ins and outs as to how the servers were set up, et cetera?
Well, but she should have known the risk, because you can't tell me that in 4 years of being Secretary of State that she didn't think that any of this information might be classified in the future when she's exclusively using a private email address and only dealing in issues of foreign national affairs.
Can someone tell me why she did this?
That to me begs the question, like, who ever thought for a second that if there was discovery, they wouldn't be turning over the emails? Did anyone really think that Hillary thought she was going to keep all this covert from the world?
But I think the issue is bigger than that, or maybe narrower than that. Look, let's assume for sake of discussion that she did disseminate classified information.
Okay.
Okay. But let's assume she either received it or disseminated it to an authorized person. Okay. If the only thing she did wrong was do it over a personal server, but otherwise the act would have been perfectly legal and authorized, I don't see that she gets prosecuted because she used a personal server instead of a government secured server. So that's where I come out on it. So there are a number of issues involved. And that's why I said it's a little tricky. But the bottom line is, assuming she disseminated the classified information to an authorized person, I don't think she gets prosecuted because it was over a personal server. The other issue, basically, with respect to that, is that I think where she put herself in harm's way is, I think, by saying, I didn't use my personal server to receive or send any information that was classified at the time. If it turns out that she did, then under those circumstances, she may not be guilty in terms of a crime for which she can be prosecuted, but it definitely will have some bearing and effect on how the public perceives her in the future.
Also, she had a responsibility to protect this information, and it was very easy for her to do so. If she wanted the convenience, like she says, she could have connected to through a virtual private network from her home computer to the government email address, which FBI agents do when they're on the road, corporate executives do when they're on the road. So there is no reason why she couldn't have transmitted her government business over a secure network.
But you know, Rich, what you said at the beginning, a fact pattern in search of a crime, it is so strange that somebody would do this, and everybody is, and there's a question about what she destroyed at one point and what exists. And there are people saying, well, why are they looking into this? This is excessive. Until we figure out exactly what happened and what was destroyed and what was disseminated, this does have to be investigated thoroughly.
Well, there's another issue. The other issue, she said something else. She said basically that she deleted, 3,000 or so personal emails. Now, the personal server's in the hands of the Justice Department. And if she deleted them, that doesn't mean that they cannot be extracted from the hard drive. So the real question is, if it turns out that she did in fact delete emails that are not personal but related to government business, now that exposes her to the possibility of a perjury prosecution because of what she said, because she testified to that, I believe, under oath when she basically was before Congress.
If none of this goes anywhere from a legal standpoint, your point about the optics, in my view, is her biggest problem. I mean, it just doesn't look right. It just doesn't. Because
well, you know what I just think from the political side, Jimmy, which I can speak to, it confirms the worst suspicions for those who don't like her, and for those who like her, it echoes of either witch hunt here or they're making a mountain out of a molehill. So I'm not sure it changes too many. Obviously, in the political window that we're in right now, maybe that sliver of that 2 to 5% that are in the middle could shape it a little bit. But Bill, I'll ask you, when you're in a Justice Department in the same political party of the candidate, do they tend to go harder to make sure there's no appearance of impropriety, or do they tend to go easier because it is Washington and it is political?
Well, years ago, when I was with the Justice Department, I was investigating a high-ranking member of the political party that was in power. And my ability to go forward with that investigation was impaired and impeded by the person who was in charge of the work that we were doing in the Justice Department. So politics does enter into it. One would hope that the Justice Department is certainly apolitical, but it doesn't always work that way, and it didn't work in the case I'm talking about.
But also, Richard, there is a public interest here, and by Hillary Clinton possessing these emails, like Bill said, she chooses what the public sees. She chooses what gets erased and handed out. And under the Freedom of Information Act, if people want to request those emails during her tenure at the State Department, the State Department can't find them.
I get it. Whenever I look at this, regardless of the politics or regardless of the individual, if you give a little bit of credit that these people are intelligent, you ask the question why. Did anyone think at this table in a million years she really thought she was going to pull a fast one and trade national security information with whoever? Now, I'm not saying that mitigates everything that she did thereafter, but if we look at, the rationale, the purpose, the intent, and then the delivery, I don't know. But we're going to certainly see how this plays out. And speaking of playing out, we haven't even really started the full exhibition season, but certainly for the Patriots, but they're already having a major day, not on the field, but in court. Deflategate going to federal court. Tom Brady and Commissioner Goodell here appearing in a New York courtroom today as they try to reach a settlement over Brady's 4-game suspension. We're going to tell you whether they reached a deal or not.